Welcome to Season 2, now called Absurd to Possible. Last season, we met incredible people working on large perennial problems, like our transit needing more order, our lives needing more serious play, and in general, our lives needing more time for what matters most. This season, I don't want to make a proclamation that all things are absurd. Absurd is in the eye of the beholder. I'd like to point out that even if we are frustrated with systems failing us today, we are allowed room to make these systems better by their very faults. And this show is to celebrate those striving to create that better world. In this episode, we're fortunate to have Guy Sengstock as a guest. His work is a practice that builds closer, more true relationships with yourself and others. We try out his circling approach a bit in this episode. We circle around why I started this podcast. And later in the episode, Guy shares personally how he encounters more binding relationships in his own life. And I share how I struggle to hold space for my own relationships at times. If anyone is looking for closer connection with other people as a practice, look into guyscirclinginstitute.com. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. And all my best to you all. Now here's the episode. Our guest today is Guy Sengstock. He's the creator of the original circling approach, and I don't think I could give justice to what the circling approach is, so this whole episode is going to be about us learning about what it is, but I can say that if anyone is wanting to get those around them better and get themselves better, and understand themselves better, I highly recommend they look into Guy's work. And just to throw his website out at the front, it's circlinginstitute.com. So I wanted to make sure everyone gets that. But yeah, thanks, Guy. I really appreciate you coming here to kick us back into podcast production.
Yeah, thank you. Received. You're very welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
This show's called This Is Absurd, and we kind of point at things that we find maybe absurd, or maybe they're just frustrating, and they're things that we want to work on on kind of a societal level, and we just expect them to be better. Part of us does, and then the other part of us wants to work on them to make them better. So for the framework of this show, I just see as true connection with people that we care about can be really hard to do sometimes, and I think that it's one of the most important things we could do. And I think that there's very little kind of support and help in that department. For me, there's certain relationships that should be connected better in our society, and they're just not. So I wanted to ask you, Guy, why did you start the circling approach? How did it come about?
Well, I appreciate what you're talking about, pointing to the absurd, right? Talking about what the absurd is. Because on some level, that there is something that we call circling, that it's necessary, that it was created at all, I think points to a kind of absurdity going on that I've come to find out is like, it's so profound that it's happening. Right, which is how cut off we are from relationships, like at a fundamental level, right? And I mean, we can talk about this, but I think this has a lot to do with the advent of technology, and like essentially, we've gotten to a point where we're able to communicate without communing, right? We've uncollapsed the ability to exchange information, and we can do it without having to go through the messiness of relating. It used to be, not that long ago at least, that if you wanted to exchange information with somebody, you at least had to talk on the phone. You had to do it through interaction, right? And relationship is inherently terrifying, right? It's like Think about all the think about all the things that could happen in just one interaction between you and I. Right? Like you could say something that I misunderstand that puts me in therapy for 10 years, right? Like you could say something that enlightens me, right? That I've never heard before that could change my life. Like there's so many things that can happen when two people face each other in relationship. So when, the answering machine comes along and then texting and then, social media and all the different ways that we uncoupled, right, relationship from communication. I think our nervous systems do what it always does, right? When it has a choice, it's going to do the thing it's easier, right? And I think that's multiplied structurally and societally in our everyday lives to the point where, some of the most recent statistics that I've read say things like that half of Americans report having no close friends or report that no one knows them well. Like the amount of time that we spend and the amount of actual living conversations that we have like dropped 70% in the last 10 years or something like that. And a lot of these things are actually pre-COVID. So we can just imagine what's happened after COVID. Now, like when you think about the consequences, right, of when you take relationship out of the necessity of functioning in life, you can function in life without having to relate. When you think about, well, how do we become people? I think we become people in and through other people, right? Like we literally, I have a 3-year-old and I'm like literally watching him become the person he is. And how's that happening? It's like, it's not through him having some understanding about himself. It's through this back and forth with his mother, right? All these attuned versus not attuned relationships. Him sitting on his lap, right, with his grandfather. He's swimming in inner subjectivity, right? He's swimming in the back and forth and the coordination of inner subjectivity. So at some point, probably like when his brain develops enough to the point where it can reflect back on itself and call itself I, that I, what he reflects back on is going to be in some sense, is going to be a complete donation, right, by these relationships that he's in, with his parents, right, with his community. And I would say that it's really like that deeply, as infants becoming into maturity. But I have a feeling that actually it's supposed to be like that for our whole lives, right? That we become who we are in and through dwelling in other people. And that back and forth exchange, everything that comes with that, right? Everything that comes with that is so integral, right? To being a human being, having consciousness, developing as a person, knowing who you are, having an identity, all of that stuff, right? So I kind of feel like technology has just put rocket boosters, right, on eliminating so much of relationship, right? We can connect. We have lots of connections, but we don't have more relationships, right? And I don't even think that we can even understand what the consequences of that's going to be. So I kind of feel that, like in some sense, circling, right, is a practice, you could say, is well, in circling, we practice dwelling in inner subjectivity. You could, if you wanted to boil it down, we practice dwelling in relationality and all of the aspects of relationality and being personally connected with somebody. You can imagine it as kind of like a yoga, right, of inner subjectivity.
I want to jump in with a question of what you mean by inner subjectivity, but I want to come to it from where I am and kind of explain an idea that this makes me think of, and you could tell me where there's overlap or newness or anything like that. But I have this belief or something that when I talk to someone, since we're separate people, we're never going to get each other 100% correctly.
Yeah.
So because we have this subconscious and this history and this all this background inside of each of us that we can't cut through with language. Um, but then I've been trying to. It might have come from doing your practices and just kind of pondering this idea. But I have this idea where the relationship is like this separate person that the separate entity is the relationship, and you guys could feed it things that make you trust the relationship, and then you don't need to get it like apples to apples, to communicate with one another. You kind of have a rapport that you trust, and then you, even if you in the back of your mind you're like, I get like 98% of that, but I don't get the other 2%. At least you can move on because you trust them. So is any of that kind of resonating with your philosophy of it?
So much, right? So much. I actually appreciate just the way that you put that. Like,
it's been sitting in my head for a little bit.
yeah, I like that. I like what's been sitting in your head, and I like the way that you just brought it out. Yeah, in some sense, I like that way of looking at it. It's like, oh, we just tend to the relation. And if we just tend to the relation, a lot of the stuff just works out between us, right? We don't have to I don't have to get you 100% or understand you 100% or something like that, right? Because there's this other third thing, right, that seems to be binding or holding or transcending all of it, right, in some way. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. And I would say that actually that it's precisely what grants the capacity to have genuine relationship is precisely in that I can't ever totally get you, right? And this is one of the things that we talk a lot about in circling. And I really like Martin Buber's language with this. I find it really useful here, right? Is that, what is it that makes you an other to me, right? Like, it's like you are other by virtue of that I can never make you my own subject. There's something about you that will always exceed my ability to grasp you, or my ability to think you, or my ability to read you, right? There's something, you will always be other to me. And it's that kind of inexhaustible otherness, right? And a respect for that otherness, which is where I think respect comes to, right? And that I'll never be able to figure you out. Like, there's nothing I could say that could ever summarize you in some final way. In fact, there's nothing you could ever say about you that can put a period, right, on you. There's something in you that is irreducible, right, to yourself. And in that sense, that kind of way in which there's a deep mystery is also the opening, right, for genuine, I think, reciprocity and respect that comes along with that in relationship. So I would say that one of the things I've noticed is that it's actually so much of it's the difference, right, that affords the ability to become close in so many ways, right? And being able to tolerate that difference, right? And open to the difference of the other person, right? And willing to be impacted and affected by the other person respectfully is one of the ways that we actually experience intimacy.
Something that stuck out to me that you said earlier, Guy, you're talking about the inevitable messiness of human relating, right? Like, I'm never going to fully get you. And it feels like, as we do as human beings, we try to develop technologies and methods to simplify the relating process, right? It's like, I want to put information in your head, and I can go through the process of traveling to your village and having conversation with you, and we sit down for tea and but that's going to take days, right? So instead, we invented emails, and I was like, here's a 7-word email. And it might have made it more efficient, but we lost out on the messiness. So it's almost like the information was translated, but the whatever is the core nebulous component of the messiness, the emotion, whatever, gets lost. So it's almost like we traded information for connection. Because I think what you said before, something, you can say how you said it, but something about how communicating but not communing and how you might miss out on that. And yeah, so I would love to hear just more digging into that.
Well, I think what you just really said, that like when you use the analogy of, where we used to sit around the fire or whatever and like spend time together, dwell together, right? We just send an email now because of efficiency. And I'm totally into email. I'm into efficiency. I don't think we should, I'm not anti-technology or any of that kind of stuff, right? However, there is a big loss of that. If you think about all the tacit knowledge that you receive by dwelling with somebody and sitting together, right? It's so much more than you could ever even kind of bring out into propositional language, right? There's like the way the person's sitting. There's like kind of the sense of them. There's like how far of a distance you come forward and back, right? There's all the things that are said like emotionally that are transmitted, that aren't transmitted directly verbally. There's so many things that are happening through dwelling together, right? That are so much of what it is to be alive, right? So much to what it is to be alive. So in some sense, right, to kind of bring this in perspective, that's why I think it's kind of strangely absurd that there's such a thing called circling, in which circling practices a yoga of that kind of connection. It's kind of like in some sense, it's almost like a gym, right? The way the gym takes gravity and concentrates it, right? And you just go in there and you move in a concentrated way, because we don't move anymore, right? We go to a gym to mimic that. And in a certain sense, we've gotten to that place with relationship, right? And so you could say that circling in many ways is, in the ways that we practice it, is kind of creating a concentrated environment where we engage in that, in all of that, right? And the deep forms of listening, the nonverbal kind of communications, right? The self-disclosure that happens, right? In face-to-face contact.
So is circling more so about the format of how you dialogue and have conversations, or is it more so about the depth of information that's translated because now we're in person and now you can see my eyes move and me leaning forward? Like, is it more the format of how to dialogue, or the fact that you're sharing space while you're dialoguing?
Yes. I think it's all of it. I think it's really all of it. I mean, one of the things that we, you could say we emphasize the non-transactional nature of relationship, right? Like, and it's more the depth of the relationship. And so you could say, like, in a transaction, right, is what Martin Buber would call an I-it versus an I-thou relation. An I-it relation is where basically I'm relating to what I'm relating to as a means to my own end, right? So I can relate to the tool, the fork as a means to my own end of eating, right? But I can also relate to other people as a means to my own end, right? Like I'm talking with you because talking with you is good for my status, right? You're become a means to my own status, or a means to something, right? So in circling, what we really practice is like going, well, no, like an I-thou relationship is where I relate to you as an end in yourself, right? In some sense, you are an end in the way the horizon is an end, right? Like you are on one level, you're like there's only so much what I can see, but that horizon points to what's beyond what I can see, right? And draws me to it, right? But isn't fully disclosed. And so in some sense, that's the first thing to really get, is that's really what we're dwelling in, is this sense of like, oh, you're a person. I can't assume that I know anything about you really, right? Like, I can't assume that I know what you feel, or I know what you should feel, or what you should care about, or these are all things that I can discover in you, right? That I can find out through relating with you, and I can reveal to you with me. Yeah. And so there's a lot. So a lot of what we talk about with circling is what we call the language of self-disclosure, right? Like, and it's speaking such as to reveal versus speaking in order to create some outcome or to achieve some result. It's like, I'm speaking so as to further reveal myself to you. So the language of self-disclosure, right? And that's what I'm listening for too, is I'm listening for who you are. I'm not getting so caught up about the thing that you said, but I'm listening to who's saying it, right? There's that kind of like reach into who are you really? Like, not, and noticing all my assumptions that come up in the face of that, right? And letting them go, right? And then finding out, right, what's really true for you and what's really going on with you. What do you really think? What do you really feel about me right now, right? Like, what's really, really important to you?
Can you give us an example of the concept of circling in action, like an example of what a conversation would look like within a circling parameter and what it would sound like without?
Do we think we could try it, which is kind of brave, so that the listeners could kind of hear what it entails and what actually comes of it, and then we could kind of unpack it maybe?
Yeah. Well, I could just say that so I mean, one of the things I would just say is, like, first, like, Chris, the thing I'm noticing about you, I think I'm noticing about you, right, is, well, I think what I'm perceiving is some commitment to authenticity, and I sense some kind of commitment to authenticity that's deeper than looking good or showing up cool or something like that. And it's one of the things I started to really feel at the beginning of when we first started talking, when we got on with the podcast, is just this sense of like, of aware of that you were a little bit awkward and you didn't know how this was going to go, and it was nervous, but a sense of like that there's something real going on through relating in these kinds of conversations, that like a sense of a willingness to be kind of not certain about things and showing up anyways. That's my sense. That's my sense of you. And I think what that had me do is just kind of feel like I felt a sense of relaxing into a real conversation. Like, oh, we're going to have a real conversation here.
I think it's a flattering reflection of me. To me, yeah, I think authenticity is big on my mind, and I think it's important. I think that we could do better when we're authentic. We're better at everything when we're ourselves. That holds value, I think. Like, why do something worse when you could do it better? I think that, yeah, part of me doesn't worry about being like coming off perfectly or cool, but that's also one of my challenges of running the podcast, is like, to get people engaged, I almost have to be inauthentic in a way. Like, I have to be overtly excited, because that's kind of the norm of like what you see hosting a TV show or who you see hosting shows. And that's kind of not my style or something. But so the podcast and this experience and this project is like trying to find my own style in a way too, because then maybe people can gravitate towards it if I break into it.
I noticed when you said finding my own style, I felt something kind of light up in me. Like I think I was like, oh, I maybe that's actually what I think I maybe was responding to is this finding. There's a place where I can feel there's a certain openness of how I'm experiencing kind of you finding your way into this conversation or finding your way in a bigger sense with this podcast. There's like I think I think that's maybe what I was responding to now that I'm realizing it.
What it makes me think of is all the previous guests and now you as a guest, and how I see them as like this. Even if the show never makes it and never like gets more views and never like helps more people, like I see the catalog of our people and our guests as like this like message in a bottle to the world. Like, check these people out; they could help you. Like if the world gets worse maybe than what it is now, like these lessons in these episodes are actually quite useful to something, some deeper understanding that I hold like beyond words or something.
Is it fair to say that this is that you're doing the podcast, right? That you're orienting in this way is a form is has something to do with a way of caring. Is that fair?
It was born maybe out of frustration, and then, well, instead of just being frustrated, put it towards some practice of caring. I think that word fits there, but I think that there's like more complexity to that origin. Maybe
I'm hearing pain too.
It's a wanting more for myself and then anyone else who finds themselves on Earth, you know. But I'm the one who experiences my perspective. I think there was like pain and anger kind of was in the origins. Like I remember like leaving a voice memo to Amari about like, let's have guests on and people who could change the world and like put them in the hot seat, and like this form of anger directed towards them so that they fix something. And like that has since like not been productive and not good, but it was just like this off the cuff like idea voice memo.
So it's kind of like, so what I'm hearing is basically out of frustration about the way the world worked or was frustrating for you, right? Your first idea was to call on people who could make a difference and then create an experience for them such that would call them into making that difference.
A lot of the early thoughts of the show was to test their validity of their ideas, and then by doing that it helps them make their ideas better, but also, you know, gives our audience insights into what is viable out there for where they, you know, put their time and their attention and their resources.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What was it like for you, Mar? Kind of just listening to that interaction.
Thanks for asking. A couple things. Like it felt like love, but not in the kind of contemporary romantic sense. Like love is in like pure presence.
Just so I'm tracking you, Matt, it felt like love, the interaction or the
interaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it felt like I was in a field of something that was indistinguishable between presence and love, like being so present with somebody that it just feels like love. I think that obviously I've known Chris for a longer time, but I think that if you were going to be perceptive enough and present enough with him to notice certain things, that is like a form of saying like, you matter enough to me that I'm going to pay attention to these things.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think that's so distinguishable from love. I felt, I don't know if validated is the right word, but like in some ways, like it felt like I could see what Guy saw of Chris. So I was like, oh, okay. So my read and what I sense of Chris is also seen by others. So it kind of felt like validating in a way.
Yeah.
And then there was another part where you said something like, I'm paraphrasing, but something around the lines of like, oh, Guy doesn't feel like Chris wants to be cool or like is trying to be cool. So then there's a part of my brain of like, does Guy think that I'm trying to be cool? Like, was that a jab at me? So noticing that was interesting and fun. So yeah, it felt like an intimate process, a raw process, and a very human exchange.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Here, well, a couple of things. I felt I appreciated that. I think mostly I'm just appreciating the eloquence of your language, the economy of your language, and just the way that you talk. I was really drawn into it. And so it sounds like there was something about the exchange that validated a sense of Chris that you had. And so seeing that was like a sense of like, yeah, seems like there's some kind of deep and true there. Like kind of validating for your experience of Chris. And I think the other thing that I felt affected by was just how it seemed like you were called into disclosing, like you naturally kind of disclosed yourself. Like you didn't just describe what you saw in the interaction with Chris and I, but you did describe that, but then I saw you, like you revealed you, right? Like when you talk, I felt more validated. And then when you talked about the more uncomfortable thing, it's like, was he saying that like I'm like, am I all show or right? I appreciated that a lot too. Yeah. And so it's interesting. It's like the thing I'm just noticing right now is I think I went from, since we started circling, right? I feel like I've just dropped. Like I feel like there's a sense of where I dropped from a little bit of a freneticness, right? Into something like lower in my body, like just a sense of, oh yeah, like I'm a person, you guys are people. Here we are kind of talking about it. Like I'm present to your guys' relationship. I'm curious about your guys' relationship. Like I'm more alive to that and aware of that. And also a sense of like, when you said, well, let's do circling, a part of me was like, oh fuck, I hate doing that. I hate that. Like it's just, there's a sense of like, okay, I'm on the spot. Let's like do circling or something like that. Right. And so there was a kind of a sense of a tension there. And so instead of setting something up like circling, I decided just to lean in and just say what was most present for me. And that what was most present for me was to start off with Chris and then you, right? In that sense. Yeah.
I was wondering, Amari, like what out of the interaction made you identify the word love? Like what was it about it because that's a big word and a powerful word. And I think that it points to a good word that we need more of, but it's all just like this frou-frou, hairy-fairy space of love. But like what was love about it to you, or presence?
I feel like most of our conversations are very like surface level. Like even if we're saying something loving, something complimentary, acknowledgement, somebody would say, Chris, you're so awesome for making a podcast, right? But it's like lots of people have podcasts and lots of people are awesome for making podcasts, right? But to say, Chris, I see how you have such a care, like Guy said, coupled with a frustration about the human condition, coupled with like a lack of self-consciousness around awkwardness, right? Like that feels so much more about Chris, the one and only Chris, rather than anybody else who makes podcasts, right? And for me, for him to take the presence and the time to identify and communicate and come into awareness of that, to me feels like love, right? I feel like a lot of times when people feel like they're not loved is when they don't feel seen, right? Like if somebody said, oh, Chris, you're a podcast host, like that doesn't make you feel seen. But what Guy just said, if I were Chris, would make me feel very seen. Even if it's not all a compliment, but it is very me, and it would take presence to see it. So that's why, for me, I see an inextricable link between presence and love when it comes to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I just appreciated too with what you did when you clarified, because you clarified something that had me go, oh yeah, that really is kind of one of the things that we practice in circling. That's one of the things we practice. I think you even used the word, Amar, about the sense of being seen. Like, he didn't just like compliment you or talk about you as an awesome, like Guy didn't just make a positive judgment of you. He kind of went in and saw like, oh, there's something about the way who you are as a person, right? That I'm wanting to acknowledge, or that I'm reaching into, or inviting out into the open, or something like that. That sense of being seen personally. And that's a big practice, right, of circling, which is like the different levels of listening, of like, there's listening to what you say, there's listening and really getting all the content, which is really important. But then there's getting levels in hearing and listening for deeper levels of context. For you to be paying attention in this way and saying all these things, what must be important to you, right? Like if you feel like, kind of in some sense, like just asking that question, what happens with your attention? It's something like it goes like deeper, right? It goes like, oh yeah, what must you be caring? What are you caring about here? Like, who cares about that? Like, it's like that kind of listening or looking and asking questions, pointing to, like reflecting back what you imagine is true about that. All are ways of inviting out another person's world, right? And that kind of listening. So that's one of the key components of the things that we practice in circling, is that kind of real like that in-depth listening is what I would call it, which I think you just articulated without even knowing that you were doing that in what you observed. So I appreciated that.
Thanks, man. I'm curious, Chris, when Guy was in the process with you, did you feel loved? Like, would you say one of the feelings that came up was a feeling of feeling seen or feeling loved?
To be honest, I would say no off the bat.
Okay.
Like,
it's all good. Just curious.
Because it was kind of pointing at things that I cared about and like scratching the surface, because it was only like 2 little blurbs of dialogue in this format, but it seemed to be going in directions I cared about, but like I wasn't feeling loved or perceived like in that way yet or something. But I do want to say that when I did a few sessions of circling, and then I was circled, like the one kind of with the main focus on me, I went from a space of being very walled off and closed, and like everyone's kind of annoying to me, or like I don't have time for other people, to through the session I got emotional, and also I was numb before, like numb to like life experience, and then I kind of like opened up over the course of the session and was like crying about things I actually cared about, and it like reminded me of things I cared about and put my perception back on to things that I cared about that I wasn't thinking about before. That's what it was for me off the bat in the first time, and I find myself in that hardened spot a lot, so I almost want to ask Like, what is that hardened spot in your experience, and how can people break out of that? And like, what it
Mm.
is I feel like I don't have energy or time to like hold space for other people, and that really hurts the relationship, with my wife or my son or with anyone in my world. How do you get energy to like hold space? That
Mm.
is kind of what I wonder.
Can I ask, when you're let's just say, using the example like with your family, when you're not holding space, what are you doing? If you're not holding space, what are you holding? Something else, or are you doing something else? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what is happening sometimes is I my like time management economics person is online inside of me of like how quickly can we help you and resolve and then go to what I have to do next. So it's like, and that's a muscle that's flexed at work, when you're on the, you're like, you have to solve some problem in 30 minutes and like no one is doing a good job at it. And then that muscle kind of keeps running through the day. So then when you're with your family, that muscle's still running is kind of a recollection I see about it, but I don't know how to turn that muscle off and like shut it up and like give some time.
so it's kind of like, so it's what I'm hearing is like, one is like you're in work mode, do mode, problem solving mode,
Yeah.
right? Like means to the end, right? Let's get the solution, of course. But what I'm appreciating is that you sense that there's a different world when you turn and face your family that isn't always appropriate to be in problem solving mode.
Yeah, because the response and the results are not there. There's a tension,
Yeah,
and like things don't get better if I have that mindset.
yeah, totally. Because why is it like that mindset works with work, or it works most of the time with work when it works, right? Like, but when you turn that same mindset on your family, something else happens. It doesn't quite work. I'm curious, like for you, like what's
The thing that comes to mind, it popped into the thought process earlier in the conversation for whatever reason, but I don't know how connected this is, but what comes to mind is I see kind of modern day work as like this pseudo life that like if it were to fall apart, you just go get another job. So like it's not like, at least for some people, like for corporate work, it's like if this all goes to hell, then I guess we'll figure something else out. It's not real life. And then the life with your family, if you're dedicated to your family, it's a more for life thing and a long-term thing. And if you mess up, it matters a lot more. That's what comes out for me with the question you asked.
Yeah, I wanna play with that real quick and just hypothesizing here. So we'd love to hear both of you fellas' thoughts on it. But we're talking about Chris at work versus Chris with his wife and his son. And at work, he gets into the mindset of like, okay, what's the problem that we need to solve? Let us solve the problem. Let's get it done. Right? Which is like an economy of time approach. Right? So it's like his energy is being diverted to the solution to a problem. And in work, that's what we do. We are solving problems. How do we make more money? How do we get this, distributor to give us more whatever, right? Like you're solving a problem. But in a relationship, I don't know if it's always so much about the problem that needs to be solved, but the relationship that is yearning to be deepened, right? Like the goal at work is to solve the problem. Sometimes the goal in the relationship is to solve a problem. It's like, babe, we can't pay the rent this month. What are we going to do? It's like, yes, that is a problem. And then you should be in economy of time and like focus on solving the problem. But I feel like most of the time, the ultimate win in a situation, a conversation between me and a partner is a deeper relationship, not necessarily a target goal.
Yeah.
Does that translate?
Yeah. I think I check with you, Chris, too, but like what you're highlighting there is like, yeah, there's a different mode. Like solving problem and then turning towards a family it's a different law of physics, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that it ties back partly to how I said the relationships, another entity that needs support and feeding, like the right stuff.
And then also just back to what you originally talked about when you said, I think what you said is you used the example in circling where, oh yeah, there was something that happened in circling where my heart unthawed. And that there's something to do with these two modes in our heart being open or not open. And I think you were asking about like essentially like you were asking about like how do I keep my heart open?
To get it open or like tap into it. Yeah.
Maybe
it's too much to have it open all the time is one crazy idea, but propositionally I go to like the next step and then it's like, oh, okay, we're going to pause everything else. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk. I think that the next challenge, how does one hold space but not try and solve their problem? I hear that a lot, and it's like more of a male thing to do, like solve the problem than just to empathize with.
Yeah.
A valuable lesson for me is like, you could throw the word empathize at me as much as you want, but what do you mean by that? It's kind of like the frustration in my modality. What's your take on empathizing with someone?
Totally. Well, it's kind of like, I totally get what you're saying. I think I get what you're saying because it's like, you can sit across from me and say, like, give me empathy or I empathize with you. But like, that's just a word at some level.
Yeah, they're just words.
Right. Therefore, when I hear people making those claims, it's like kind of like alienating or frustrating or something.
You're trying to lead me to something, but I'll try to go where I go.
I'm doing my best to empathize.
you're just opening a door.
Yeah.
Is that part of empathizing? Like opening doors for people?
Yeah, I think about empathizing is in the essence of empathy is in some senses has to do with kind of feeling what you may be feeling with you. Right? Like, and oftentimes now there's a lot of different ways people use the word empathy, right? There are people that I think there are certain people that just seem to have more mirror neurons or something where they just feel what the other person's feeling without even knowing anything about what they're feeling, right? There's people that are just kind of like that. But I think in the kind of empathy and the way that we talk about it in circling is really has a lot more to do with if I can actually like in some sense imagine being you and walking in your shoes. I may be able, if I can imagine doing that and walk into your shoes in the specific way, like not being me in your shoes, but being you in your shoes and like walk in them, I may actually be able to begin to feel what you're feeling with you. That's essentially like what empathy is. Like really entering into the subjectivity of another as they're willing to disclose it to you. And like really imaginatively putting yourself in their shoes and going like, oh, okay.
As the one wanting to empathize is kind of uncovering what are the things that are keeping me out of their shoes. and I think that could be pretty hard to do in some situations because I think that as mechanisms within us, we close those doors because it hurts too much and it doesn't help us do other things. So maybe someone who has practiced circling a lot could open and close those doors more willingly, possibly.
Well, it's a couple of things. Like hearing that, what I think what I heard is what you're talking about is like, oh, well, what can it's a profound question. Like, well, before I actually step into your shoes, what's preventing me from stepping in your shoes? And I think one of the first things you said is something about like hurt or something was painful. Like, so there's maybe a place, did you mean like, it's like, oh yeah, if we've had interactions that have hurt, like in some level been frustrating or been hurtful or something like that, and we haven't talked about that or resolved that, a part of me is kind of like going to be closed to you and is not going to be willing to walk over in those shoes. Is that kind of what you meant?
I think it was more along the lines of kind of personality and experience differences and like taste differences. Like if someone is really upset because their car's scratched, and I don't give a shit if my car's scratched, how do I open the door to care if my car's scratched is kind of what I mean. Like, so is there a way in which you get beyond that barrier?
Well, I would say, first of all, if you desire actually, right, to understand them and get them, you have all the ingredients that you need. They're different than I am. Whoa. Like, it's like for me, I relate to that, by the way. I don't care about all that much in that world, right? So it's like, I can't, I don't know. Well, we got that scratch over with. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Let's get more or something, like I don't value that as much. But if somebody's really caring about that and I have a desire to get to know them, right, and know who they are, then right there, that difference is kind of the place of curiosity is where I can start from. It's like, what is it so what is that? What is a scratch? What is a car? Like, what does that mean to you? Right. And I would need to know, I would need to invite, in some sense, like, in some sense, what that car is for you and what it meant that it was scratched. Right. And why you care about that and all of that stuff. And if I understand that kind of background, that context, then I can maybe begin to understand, like, walking in their shoes and go, oh, now I get it.
That makes me think of the two individuals kind of set sail in the ocean, and then they're kind of bound together in this time of conversing. And I think that they're on a journey together in this framework, and they might drift based on the questions and the conversation. They'll drift towards like, the car doesn't matter that much together. And then they might drift towards like a realization where the other person sees their world. You're going to different areas of consideration together instead of separately. And there might be certain areas that are harder for one person to get to because they're going to have to ask more questions.
The one thing that's really crucial, and not a requirement for empathy, is agreement. Like, in any sense, it's not like to understand where you're coming from and to be able to like put myself in your shoes and then see how you would feel, right? Based on that, right? Like that car scratch doesn't mean that like you have to value that or you have to agree that that's good or something like that, right? At all. It's actually just honoring otherness. And I think this is one of the things that one of the things that gets in the, like, you could say the thing that comes up oftentimes in circling that people work through, right, has to do with interpersonal judgments, right? And I think that's if there's an enemy, right, to intimacy, right, or communion or closeness, it's like fixations on our judgments about each other, right? And if you think about it, like interpersonal judgments, and if you think about usually like what like if you break down a judgment, it's basically usually there's some discernment, some statements of some discerning that's probably somewhat true, at least about something that you see. But what makes it a judgment is a hook of identity. It's like, it would be something like, oh, you got upset when your car got scratched. Discernment. Yeah, you got upset. You could probably go like, yeah, we got upset. But if I go like, you're fucking so shallow, right? If the insinuation or the hook is like a hook about you as an identity, in that moment, right? Like at some level, I've just made you a thing, right? And the moment I've just judged you, then our minds do this interesting thing. It just collects evidence, right? It just collects evidence to prove what that judgment is, right? And then that judgment ends up becoming this thing where it almost doesn't matter what you say or what you do after that. I'm just finding evidence to be right about my judgment in a certain sense. I would say that so much of that, like, defines the way that we are contracted or defended or close off from other people, right? And what gets in the way in a big way.
I think that ties into something we started a conversation with Guy around this idea of, again, paraphrasing, but you only know yourself in relationship to other people, right? Like your son, for example, your 3-year-old knows himself in relationship to how his mother interacts with him, doesn't interact with him. He's like, oh, that is me, that isn't me, whatever have you, right? So by judging somebody, it's being like, that's what they are. And if I judge it, now I know what I am not, right? I am not somebody who gets upset at, scratches on my car, which kind of reaffirms and creates data for who I am as a person. And I think the subconscious fear of not judging that person and just understanding them is the fear that the line between us will get too blurry and I won't know who you are and what I am, because I can't say that that's a bad thing, a shallow person versus I am this thing, right? So I think the true mastery that's available is I am able to tether my boat to you to understand what's going on, knowing that my boat is still my boat and I am not yours. I'm not your thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's just what comes up for me when I hear you guys talk.
Totally. It's sovereignty.
Compassionate sovereignty.
Autonomy, sovereignty. Yeah. That's like that sense. In fact, man, to the degree that I'm sovereign and have a sense of myself is to the degree that I could actually be with you. To the degree that sovereign, like I'm not centered in myself, right? I'm like collapsed in myself, or I'm like too holding on to myself, right? Too rigid in myself, like too postured in myself. Is both of those things, I'll either merge with you or I'll defend against you and be outside of you, right? So this kind of like sense of just being able to be grounded in your own self, in your own skin, comfortable in your own skin, right? It's to the degree that that's really true. It's to the degree that I can really fully open up to you, right? Because in essence, you could think about intimacy as something about like, it's basically like, it's a sense of like, yeah, you and I can choose to be close, even though we're different than each other.
The use of judgment is so that I can know who I am and what I am not. But if I truly know what I am and who I am not, I don't need to judge you because I don't need that reinforcement. I don't need the false positive, the false negative. Yeah.
And I would say that like judgment is downstream. It's kind of a symptom often. I won't say always, but the thing I've noticed is that like interpersonal, the way we're talking about judgment, interpersonal judgments and that kind of like making you a thing, and then that's all you are, in my mind, is the mind's way of managing anxiety, right? Yeah. It's like usually like at some level, like we were talking about before, one of the reasons, like if we have a choice to communicate without commuting, why we just we'll send a text versus like dealing with the interaction, right? Is because there's you're opening up to the unknown when you really turn towards another person, right? Like in some sense, you're opening to otherness, right? And if oftentimes, like if I feel threatened by something that you said, or I feel threatened, or it looks too chaotic, right, for my system, I'll just go, oh, that's just means that you're da-da-da-da, right? And the moment I do that, I've just basically condensed all that chaos into like a box and created a separation from you, right?
Right.
And so it's like, you could say that judgment oftentimes is a symptom of just the mind's way of managing anxiety, right? In some sense, this is one of the things that, we talk about a little bit in circling, is that sometimes what we'll do is we'll come clean about our judgments with each other. Here's the important part. I'm not saying my judgments of you, right, to tell you who you are. I'm actually revealing myself and sharing my judgments of you. Right? I'm basically like, I'm revealing places I get anxious with you, essentially. I'm revealing places where I feel threatened by something that you brought up or something that you represent to me. So there's a way of communicating judgments that are actually a self-disclosure versus another disclosure. And oftentimes when we do that, that's the beginning of clearing the gunk between the stuff that's on the window between you and I, right? Is like when we clear our judgments in some sense. And we open up, right? We open up to the other in that sense.
Using the word judgment helped me unravel this a little bit, because to me, what I'm seeing maybe with certain relationships, I get angry and short-tempered about it, but I didn't think to ask, what am I doing here? Why am I angry? And I think what I was doing was characterizing the individuals and labeling them, and that's exactly what you mean by, that's kind of your brain's way of putting a label on that, a heuristic on that. That's figured out, move on to the next thing, kind of economics of the mind. But what it took me to realize that was asking, why am I angry? And then it kind of uncovered more of like, what am I characterizing that person as? And it might be, they're annoying, or they're unintelligent, or they're wasting my time, and all of these labels. And that, like, for me, the way my mind works, and maybe it does for other people too, and maybe this would help someone, but that anger had no language to it in my mind, and no label. Like, the labels were more of a feeling than a conscious anything. So I think slowing down to ask those questions is what is going to help me in my particular situation. So
I appreciate what you said, just slowing down.
Yeah, that's a common ask of, if you go into therapy, they say, well, slow down a little bit and see what's happening.
It's also something that's really practiced in circling often. Because oftentimes, just like what you said, it's like, there's just, at first it's just anger, right? But then if you slow down, actually that's one level. And underneath that is like maybe a judgment. Underneath that is maybe I feel threatened. And underneath that is like, I need you. I desire, right? Like, there's that kind of slowing down and looking and feeling and disclosing that with other people. And that slowness seems to give so much.
Where I might want to go next on this is I'd love to put our minds together to try and uncover, what is the thing that someone who has to listen to this propositionally is going to get it and be like, oh yeah, I could utilize this practice in my life.
Well, it's like something going back to Buber. Buber, by the way, Martin Buber was a kind of an existential psychologist, kind of Jewish theologian back. I think a lot of his work happened in the 1920s through 1960s, early 70s. And his notion of I, thou. And one of the things that was really interesting that he said, and I've always really found this to be really profound and very true, is when he talked about that, essentially, he says, existentially, life is always, for human beings, is always a relationship, right? We're always in a relationship. We're never outside of a context that then stepped into the context. We're always in a context. And in that context, we're always a social being. We're always in relationship with our environment. And so he emphasizes that reality. And what he says is that we're either in one of two kinds of relationships, I thou or I it. And there's another profound thing he says. He says, consider that the I of it, right? When the I it is, he says there's the I it and I thou are spoken as one word, right? So it's I hyphen it, I hyphen thou, right? They're spoken as one word, right? But he says the I of it is not the same I as the I of thou. And if you think about that, there's something really profound in what he's saying. And I've really found this to be the case too. And especially when you were talking about, Chris, this kind of modal switch from when you were talking about going from like work mode to family mode, right? This essentially, I think what you were saying is like, oh yeah, in work mode, it's I it, right? Means to an end. Let's get things done, solving problems. And then you come home and it's not always easy to switch out of that mode. But like when you do switch out of that mode, it's like you're more like, okay, go from I'm relating to my kid as an it. And from an it, I'm like, why are you taking all this time to say all these things to me? And like, don't you realize that there's so much, we may have that reaction. That's the kind of I'm in. Versus when I start to see him as an end in himself, right? I notice a different I arises. I'm a different I. It's a different mode, right? That all of a sudden who I am becomes different as they become thou, right? And that's where all of a sudden they're no longer a means to my end. He's an end in himself, right? And there's a new relationship that happens there, right? So I think that shift and that kind of feeling that shift and being able to evoke that shift, right, is really kind of what we're talking about, right? Of that there is a whole mode of relation that we aren't on the way to accomplish something. We are in the thing that matters, right? How can we savor it together? How can we commune together, right? How can we be and breathe in it together?
I'm hearing and I'm starting to see the picture of I it and I thou versus I thou. And the I thou, like I hear I thou, like I need one more descriptor of that I thou. Like what does I thou mean? Mm-hmm. Is there any more metaphor to that or another angle of that? And I've heard it in many different places, but what is that pointing towards is kind of my question. I could get an inkling of it, but for me to get it, I think I need like a little more description of it.
Yeah.
What that means.
I'm trying to think of a recent, like a concrete example. I think the other day, so like for I'm working in my office. My wife comes in and she's like, started being really adamant about kind of like getting my attention and getting this thing done and having this answer quick. And I was like, my first immediate thing was like, well, I gave you the answer and like, you're not liking it. But she's like, what about the answer? But one of these really tense. And I had a graceful moment in that moment because I was like, if I would have just kept responding to the frustration, that would have turned into an argument and hurt feelings and all of that kind of stuff. And at a certain point, I stopped and I'm like, wait a minute. Something's really matters to you right now here. Something's super important. And I just said that. And she kind of stopped. And there was this moment where like, it was almost like the momentum of her stress and on me kind of faded back for a moment and some tears came to her eyes. And I was like, oh, this is about a future we're having together here. This is super important to you. It has to do with like kids and futures and all of that. Right. And I was like, oh, okay. And there was just a moment of silence of like where we made eye contact. And there was just a moment of like recognition of that we're in a life together and that this is more important to her. What that little detail was connected to was like connected to the deepest part of her heart. and connected to the deepest part of my heart. And all of that got present in one moment. And the whole argument or the stress of that dropped. And there was this moment of like just affinity, love, and understanding that happened there. There was a little bit, it was almost like a little bit of eternity. It felt like a little moment of eternity in some sense and a reconnection. I would say the beginning of that conversation, I was hyper I it, right? And she was hyper I it. And then there was a moment where we shifted and I was like, oh, a human, something matters to you. This is connected to this, presencing that, me feeling that, her feeling me present to that, us mutually getting how important that was implicitly and like a moment of deep presence, acknowledgement, and kind of it's kind of felt like a little moment of eternity got present right there with us.
Those are beautiful moments that I think people long for, and maybe there's great value in them. That there's more realness there, or mattering and value.
Could I ask Amar, what happened for you and me when you heard me share that? I just noticed some facial expressions and things. I wonder if you could put the subtitles onto that.
Thanks for asking, Guy. Yeah, I mean, as you were sharing the story, I was just kind of watching it in my head as if it was a movie. I was just like seeing Guy at his table with a bunch of shit to do and the wife being like, we need to solve this thing. And for me, you know, we entered that conversation because Chris was asking for clarification around I, it versus I, thou. And for me, I think that honestly, we can boil any conversation down to, is this an I, it conversation or an I, thou conversation? And if it's an I, thou conversation, it's like, because I want to be closer to you. Like the end goal of this conversation is a deeper relationship. And sometimes we have to navigate an it to get there, right? Like Guy, you have to navigate whatever it is that she was trying to logistically figure out. But what she actually wanted was, hey, we're doing this life thing together. We're in love, right? Like that's actually what she wanted. So I don't know, as you were talking, I was considering like a conversation with my partner of just like anytime we're about to start something that feels like a lot, just being like, is this an it or a thou conversation? Like, is this something we're going to like just focus on the logistics and knock this out in 5 minutes? Or is this a thou conversation? Because that's going to change how I approach it. Yeah, just getting clear on what that is. Because I also don't, I think that we are over indexed in it conversations as a species right now, but those are not valuable, right? Like things still need to get done, right? But I think that we would have deeper relationships and things would get done better if we focus more on thou conversations, like who are you? What is the relationship that we desire together? So yeah, it's imbalanced right now, but I would love to see what it looks like to balance them out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It strikes me even like, you know, as I'm thinking about this, another maybe example of this is like I have a 3-year-old. I'm 50. I'm going on 53. I have a 21-year-old boy and a 3-year-old boy. And I remember when my 21-year-old I had in my first marriage, and I've been married to my wife Brianne for going on 14 years. And the whole time we were together, she didn't want to have kids, like expressly didn't want them. And at some point, she started to want them right when I'm like turning 49. And so all of a sudden, like didn't even see this coming, but all of a sudden there's this new proposition. Let's have a kid. And I would have to say, right, like I was not expecting that. That was really surprising for me. And I spent, that was a real struggle for me because I was like, I've already had a kid. We weren't looking to have a kid, right? I have a lot of professional ambitions. Like this is my mode. That wasn't in the cards. when I started to try to look at to answer that question, should I say yes to having a kid? I have to say, at least for me, trying to make that decision using my frontal lobes, man, I couldn't come up. I don't think my frontal lobes are designed to be able to make such a decision as a result of that. But what was interesting was like, there was a moment, her sister recently had a child. And so she went to LA and spent a couple of weeks down there. And then when she came back home, there was this moment where Brianne like opened the door and she came in, and she had just spent 2 weeks with an infant. And I saw this little spark, like a little like bud of something like open up from being around an infant. And it was wild. It was like, I saw it. It was beautiful. And it was a little bud. And in that moment, I saw it was so weird. It was all at once. I just kind of got this, like the moment she like came in the door, I got this sense of the only way that would totally flower open is if she becomes a mother. And in that, and as soon as I kind of felt that, I felt my heart go, all right, let's have a kid. I can pour myself into that. Like, there's no way I can see that bud and like, no, let's I can devote myself to that in some sense. Right. And it's so funny because I then just in that moment, all my resistances and all my self-concerns and all of my considerations about my career and all this kind of stuff, like something dropped away and something much more deeply from my heart came into being. And it was so interesting, and what my experience has been of like having this child at this age. First of all, it's been profound. It's been profound, right? Like witnessing a little being come into being, right? Like, I swear to God, like when you look at a little infant, like what exactly are you looking at? It's like you're looking at like pure value, like pure meaning, almost in some sense, like out of nothing is coming into being. But I have to also say, I feel like I'm witnessing another kind of birth of watching my wife recognize herself as a mother and become a mother. There's another birth going on there, right? In some sense. And being a part of that has ended up enriching me and having me grow at levels that I don't even think I could have even have comprehended or understood in some sense. In that way, in some sense, that decision or finding myself not being able to decide otherwise, right? But to go forward with my wife, in a certain sense, it's this thou sense, right? It's this kind of like, it's this experience of relationality, of love, right? That overcomes all of my rationalizations and all of my kind of like self-closures and contortions and stuff that leads to something that's greater than the sum of all of us in a certain sense. I think that's another example of that too. And that's been really, really, really present for me in my life.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. And congrats on your kid who's now alive because of that.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, we're going for another one now.
Oh, wow. She really got you.
Now I'm going on 53 and we're looking to have another one.
Oh, wow. She's dowing the shit out of you. I think that what comes up for me is conscious or subconscious. There's like a reprioritization of a thou that becomes more important than an it, right? Like when she walked in with the glint in your eye and you're like, oh, yeah. You are now, that feeling of you is now more important to me than the career aspirations that might be at risk, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that implied in that is also like, as a listener, audience member partaking in this podcast, we could say, hey, just go around and have only thou conversations, but like you would just be constantly empathizing.
Yeah.
You'd be constantly crying. It'd be like a lot, right?
That's not the message here. That's not what we're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the opportunity for the listener is to say like, okay, connection is always available to me if I'm willing to practice like kind of like the circling methodology and technology. The question is when to implement it is like, is this a thou that is more important to me than the it that is trying to be prioritized, right? So if somebody's coming in to you and they're like, talking about whatever, you could approach it like, here's the answer to the problem, just leave my site. Or you can be like, oh, this is a person that like I want to deepen with. So let me adjust my approach to this conversation because it's going to deepen my connection. Yeah.
And so with the Circling Institute, like there's a bunch of different ways that you can learn. We have drop-in events every week, working in a group. Those are Thursday nights, 6 to 9. It's online. We have weekend intensives that people can partake in. We have year-long trainings to learn how to facilitate and lead circling if people want to do this kind of professionally. But we've also really recently have 3 self-study programs that people actually, where we've taken we've taken some of the basic skills, right, and put them into, where you get videos and practices and homeworks that you can do at your own pace. We recently just got done, finished with those. And so that's another way that you can dive in. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can dip into the Circling Institute and be introduced to it. But yeah, I think you're right. There's like, it's not like what we're saying that you should be having I thou conversations all the time, right? No, they ought to be kind of rare. At some level, right? But here's the thing is that being able to like, I think if anything in the experience of circling, when people get an experience of that, it can set a precedence for what's possible, right? It can give you a taste. It can give you a taste in your mouth for like that something more. There's another kind of relation, and all that makes possible. Like you get a sense of that horizon is open in the possibility, right? And just having that can be deeply reorienting in things, right? And be the beginning of things. And so such that when it's called for in your life, for example, with your family or in whatever relationship, right? When you need to be able to drop into I thou, you can begin to feel that that's even possible to do so.
I'm going to go look for more opportunities for I thou conversations because you're going to help one another and, build each other up in better ways. Maybe there's no flashy end all be all. Here's the golden ticket of why this episode's important, but it's more like just, care for the people you care about and take time to do that.
Yeah.
I take loving contest with what you just said about somebody trying to find value in the episode, because for me, I think the value is quite obvious. I'm making the assumption that every single person listening to this is a human being. And as we've already discussed, the fulfillment of a human being's life is going to be directly correlated to the relationships that they have, right? And I would also highly suggest that most human beings have a relationship that could use some work, that could use a deepening, right? Because there's no real end to the deepening that you can experience. And because there's no end to the deepening, there's no end to the amount of like satisfaction and love and fulfillment that you could feel from that deepening, right? So I would say the value of the episode is to say, okay, every human being wants deeper relationships. Here's how to create it with more presence, with more questions, with less judgment. And you got to see like a real life example of what that looks like today when, you and Guy were circling. So I think to me, the value is obnoxiously obvious and present. And so in case somebody is listening and was not aware of it. There it is.
Thanks, Mari. I don't think you could have recapped any better.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time that we spent together. Thanks to everyone who came to listen to the episode. I hope everyone connects up with their loved ones more.
And thank you, Crystal Kitties.